Okay, so I already recorded this video once before. On that day, it was much closer to the beginning of the year when, I should be filming videos like this. And I was really trying to make sure that I was getting stuff done, I was on a good timeline, all that kind of stuff. And what happened was I forced it and it was a chaotic mess. So I am deciding to re-record and upload this super late. So here we are, kind of at the end of January, and I'm gonna talk through my 2024 reading for this year, and then kind of where I think I'm headed next, and what I'm excited about. So 2024 really for me was the year where I came back to reading as a fan as opposed to reading and grading work from students for my job. So I previously was in the classroom every day as a teacher. I taught secondary English. So I had 8th grade students coming in every single day, and I was reading all of their papers. And at the end of the day, my eyes were just going to go cross-eyed if I read much of anything else. Really burnt out, really tired. And so I had just put a lot of reading to the side for the last few years, which is truly heartbreaking to me. So 2024, I actually started a new job where I'm still working in schools. I still help stock classroom libraries. I get to help teachers. I get to help students, but I'm not in the classroom of my own. So like I don't have however many students that I have to grade their work each week, which is hugely beneficial to me because otherwise it would just be too much to keep up with. So I'm glad not to have a million papers that I'm grading constantly and pulling me away from the things that I truly love to do. But it took me a few months to kind of get into the job, and then once I was in the job, there are times where it was like really heavy for a while and really light for a while, and I hadn't really learned the rhythm of that. I've now been in this role for about a year, so I kind of feel like I have a better set of expectations job-wise. But what that means is my reading over 2024 increased, but was also really inconsistent, just because I was kind of trying to find a new rhythm to my day-to-day life. So I'm going to kind of take a look at the reading that I did and how that was spent. I will say most of the reading that I did falls into kind of the fantasy realm. I did not want to spend a lot of time in grounded reality in 2024 in America. I don't know why that would have been, something. So throughout the year, I really did kind of stay in a very fantasy space. Total books read, I read 37 books, which again, for me, is huge compared to the last few years. So I know that that is not a huge number by any stretch of the imagination, but that's where we came out, and I'm fine with that. I'm happy with the fact that I read more books, and that I found myself back in some space. There were several books that I read that only took me a day to read. Like I tend to I'll sit there on a weekend and I will read for a day, whether I finish a book or multiple books or however. So, I looked at books that were going to be a really easy return to reading for me. Took some advice from some booktubers, went back to some things that I wanted to go back and read because I'm a fan of that author. I spent some time doing a little bit of reading to kind of start catching up on some of the curriculum that I get to work with nowadays, and really just wanted to spend my time doing something other than scrolling social media, and I worked really hard to kind of make that happen. So the books and things that I read this year, just at a glance, I only had a few books that I rated as 5-star. Now, I had quite a few that were like 4 or 4.5 star. I rate things on Storygraph, so my most accurate like ratings are kind of there. But definitely the big wins that I had this year as far as books were concerned, the Encyclopedia of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries and Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. I think I had read Encyclopedia of Faeries in like the end of 2023, and I reread it when Map of the Otherlands came out. Those books are cozy, they're cute, they're fantastical, they play with fae personalities in a way that actually makes sense. It keeps them creepy, it keeps them other, and I really loved both of those, and so I gave those a pretty generous 5 stars, but they were things that made my heart sing a little bit. I rated 5 stars One for My Enemy by Olivie Blake, which was a recommendation, or I don't even know if it was a recommendation so much as just Carrie Can Reads read it and talked about it, and it was something that I was interested in. We were driving a few hours to another town for a conference with a couple of my work colleagues. I needed a book to read, and so on the way down and back, I read One for My Enemy, which starts out as kind of an interesting retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and then it kind of diverges and it keeps like some of those themes kind of throughout. It's a really interesting way of building a book. I was not expecting it to feel like every chapter was like a scene in a play. Like if you have actually read Romeo and Juliet or any plays or Shakespeare or anything like that, everything is told in scenes, and then something is going to shift and a new scene is going to start. And every chapter felt like a different scene and a different set on a stage, and there are these quick vignettes, and then it moves on, and over the course of the book it tells this story. I don't like retellings kind of as a rule, so I didn't expect to love it. I did love it. Thought it was done really well. I thought they played with theme really well. I thought that the structure made so much sense once I got into it, once I kind of understood what it was doing. And so it was just a win. One for My Enemy was just a win for me overall. I went back to one of my favorite authors. I read 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson. Her recent books have been mysteries. I read the Truly Devious series, I think in like 2020, while we were on lockdown and all of that. But she obviously has kind of stuck with mysteries, and I do like to dabble in some young adult books. So when 9 Liars was out, I went ahead and I read that, and it delivered on the things that I expected it to deliver on. It was a check mark in my book. It was exactly what I felt like I was expecting. I don't think 9 Liars was as good as some of her previous books. I think Box in the Woods felt like a better companion piece to that Truly Devious series. I feel like 9 Liars strayed a little bit further from kind of the heart of that. But overall, I thought it was a good book. I felt like I probably had more qualms with the characters' choices than I did the writing. I looked at the protagonist a couple of times and I'm like, girl, why are you making that decision? And I didn't really know how to, I would not have made those choices, so I found it a little hard to really see why someone would choose that. And then another book, I think I rated it 4.75, but I'm telling you that it belongs in my 5-star reads, is Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. So this was like the first book I read this year. It took me a minute to get into the almost like cheeky fairy tale vibe. Like it's told like a fairy tale, but it is sarcastic, it is cheeky, there's this kind of there's that flair to it, and from what I've heard, I feel like that's very Kingfisher. This was the first book of theirs that I've read, but I liked kind of the dark take on this fairy tale thing. I liked all of these tropes, but not knowing exactly what to expect from them. So I really enjoyed that. So a couple of different kind of big observations from this year. I dived into, so I completely forgot. I don't know if you can relate to this, but like when I was a teenager, I read so many books. Like I would go to, we had this bookstore called Hastings and we had Barnes and Noble, and I would go to Hastings or Barnes and Noble like every month or so, and any of the money that I had made from my like summer jobs, I was spending it on books. And so I would go every weekend or every other weekend or however often, and I would just go buy stacks of books. And I kind of forgot what the topics of all of those books were. And then when I was in college, I have a literature degree. I was reading my assignments most of the time. And so then I went straight to the classroom, so I felt really disconnected from the topics that I really enjoy reading about. But what I forgot was I had an entire romance phase in my like early teen, late teen, like just high school. Like I had a phase in there where romance made a lot of sense to me. And I kind of forgot about that. Like I did not forget about Ellen Hopkins. I did not forget about reading John Green and Looking for Alaska. I did not forget about a lot of those books that tended to circle around that mental health sphere. But I completely forgot about all of the romances that I read. There were a lot, and I can go to my living room. I still have most of the books that I purchased. Like, they're on my bookshelf at home. So, me, I'm an idiot because I literally forgot that I liked to read them. The other thing I like to read is fantasy. And you know what there's a resurgence of right now? There's this whole romance novel situation where all of them are set in, you know, fantastical worlds and all of that. And I was like, you know what? Everything I have heard about A Court of Thorns and Roses, I really think that literature brain me is probably going to hate this, but maybe if I just read it, I'll either know why I hate it or I will unlock something weird. And so I kind of did both. So at different points this year, I stepped into the world of romance and romantasy. I read all of A Court of Thorns and Roses, all the way through A Court of Silver Flames. I could probably do a breakdown on those books as far as like how I feel about each of them. I will tell you that I don't like war as a topic in books. I will tell you that I don't love the writing style of Sarah J. Maas. It has just not impressed me. It's fine. It's passable. But as someone who really likes beautiful language, there are just some things that are too repetitive in her writing for me. There are some things that are just too, I don't want to say disingenuous, but they just don't feel like they were meant with her whole heart or their whole heart. Like, not every single thing can be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, right? There's got to be degrees of that. So there are phrases and things that she uses over and over again. Titling the paintings that Pharaoh wants to paint. Like, there were just a few too many, like, linguistic shticks that she would lean into. So writing-wise, I don't regard it particularly highly. I think there are some holes in some spaces in the plot and in the symbolism and the foreshadow. Like, I think there's just some, like, I don't even think it's bad. I just don't think it's tight. I don't think it's locked in like it needs to be. I think probably A Court of Mist and Fury is my favorite because I like that kind of flirty banter back and forth. I like things that are low stakes. I love a good, the enemy, right, becomes someone that you're like, oh, your motivations are actually way better than anybody else's. Okay, cool. I like that turn, that trope, where it's not just like, oh, this enemy is someone I could like. It's like, oh, this enemy is actually right. I do like that little shtick, that little trope. I hate war as a plot device. Like, that's just not my style. So A Court of Wings and Ruin is like mostly them fighting a war. So that was really a lot for me to get through. And then I will be the person. Okay, A Court of Frost and Starlight. Let's be real, that is a Hallmark Christmas special set in this world. And I don't like Hallmark Christmas specials. I don't like Christmas. I could do without it. That's kind of how I feel about A Court of Frost and Starlight. And then I will stand on this pillar. I will be here. Cassian's not my type. So, and Nesta is the kind of person that I really struggle to get along with ever. And so A Court of Silver Flames is not my jam. I could go into deeper themes and reasons why, but like, just broad strokes, like, these are not characters that I feel deeply invested with. And yeah, I would rather just cut back to Rhys and Feyre's relationship. I don't know how that's going to be going, but they're just much more the dynamic that I like, even if that dynamic is not done perfectly. And so I took a couple of different winding routes this year through some romantasy pieces, and I did that in a couple of different ways. I did that in looking at some series and following through 3 or 4 book series arcs and playing around with those, seeing if I found anything that felt more resonant or helpful. And then I also just kind of grabbed 1 or 2 books that were somewhere in that book talk romantasy sphere, just to see how those were hitting. So the wins from that, we'll call them relative wins, when I was looking at just like standalone books or things that were just a little bit more standard romance. See, I grew up in the Harry Potter and Twilight era of the internet, meaning I am deeply entrenched in fan fiction culture and lore. And so when I saw people talking about Ali Hazelwood's Bride, I was like, you've got a vampire werewolf. It basically sounded like exactly what it is, which is like a vampire werewolf AU of whatever story you're telling fan fiction about. Except it's not fan fiction, it's just these characters. And so I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I thought it was fun. I don't think it's perfect. I don't know that the payoff was there for me, but I thought it was really funny that AO3 was in her acknowledgments. If you know, you know, right? So I thought that was really funny, and just like as I was reading, I took it with about the amount of seriousness that I would a fanfic, and for me that made it fun. Am I putting it on a best reads of wherever? No. Let's see. Then I did Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark. And I liked both of those just fine. Butcher and Blackbird was actually one of my higher rated books this year. And then Leather and Lark I did not like as much, but I do like Bryn Weaver's humor. I like the way those books are put together. I feel like I'm probably somewhere in the correct, like, I feel like they were kind of written for my reading taste and demographic as far as like what I would want in that kind of a romance. So when the next one comes out, I'll be there. In the more fantasy, romantasy genre, I don't know. Maybe I need to go back and reread this at some point, but not right now. Absolutely not right now. Because something that fell really flat for me, and I don't even know if it's a standalone because I refused to, like, I looked it up at one time and I just refused to go back to it after that point, was Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. I don't know that there is a plot. I don't know that I can tell you what happens in that book, but I can tell you that it was not for me. I didn't like the writing style. I felt like I had no attachments at all to any of the characters. I felt like I did not know what was going on most of the time. And it just felt poorly written and put together. I do remember that this author has plenty of other books and things that they've written, but that book really fell flat for me. And so that was possibly one of my lowest rated books of the year. So then the other kind of romance space that I spent time in were series and looking at some book talk suggestions, some not. So I stumbled upon Jennifer L. Armentrout, not actually because I was looking for anything in that genre, but because I was at the public library and I was just walking past their new book purchases shelves, because that's what you do. You go find the good stuff, right? And I saw the cover and I was like, oh, this looks probably like a romantic-y thing. Okay. And I like put it on a list, and then it showed back up in my like ebooks system, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll read it. It was fine. It was good. I didn't hate the writing. I didn't love the writing. I felt like it was a disappointment in the fact that I don't know what it is, and this is not the only book that has done this. I think A Court of Thorns and Roses actually does the same thing, where the first book is just like, you just need to read this for background information, but like it's kind of like you don't get to the good stuff. You don't get to the meat of what the story is actually going to be at all. And I'm like, if I'm going to read 400 pages, I feel like something should move forward, something should happen, and I shouldn't end the book on like, okay, now we can get to plot, and I'm going to have to wait another year to get that plot. Like, I don't really rock with that. But I didn't hate the writing, and I kind of liked the way that the yearning was kind of written. And so then I saw on a social media something From Blood and Ash by the same author, and so I picked that book up, and here is what I have found is my least favorite thing about this genre and these types of books. Okay, From Blood and Ash, it was fine, right? I felt kind of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm like, is this, the most beautiful writing I've ever seen? No. Do I feel like the story could be okay? Sure. Do I care enough about the characters that I might want to know what they do next? Yes. So then I pick up the second book. And the second book is just a little bit better in whatever way. So we get to the second book of From Blood and Ash. I don't remember which one it is. I read it and I was like, okay, now I care about these characters. I have to keep reading. And then the third book took a turn down in quality, in where I felt the story was going. And I think it's in the third book that we start to have this scaling issue. So in From Blood and Ash, like our main female protagonist, she is told that she's nothing, but then she finds out that she does actually have some kind of power, right? And then that power, you get so far in, and it's like, oh, you have this much power. And then it's like, oh, actually, that was wrong. You have this much power, and it's more. And suddenly you're like basically talking with gods, and she's like somehow qualified and like is up that high in the world, but like she started out like so tiny, and you didn't even know that this like god world existed. There's a scaling issue. That's the best way I can describe it, is like the scale between where we start out and where the story feels comfortable and good is like here. And then it gets a little bit bigger and you're like, okay, it feels like a stretch. You might be trying to manage too many things. Okay, but like maybe we can keep it. And then it just jumps bigger. I don't know. And then to get to the last book that is currently out in it to be, hey, so this is just a retelling of those first 4 books or however many from your main male character's point of view. Yeah, that's all we're gonna give you. Like, we're gonna tease little bits of new information, so you have to keep reading it, but there's actually no new information. Not my favorite way to build a series. Just was unsatisfying to me. And so while I actually, like, the first couple of books are like what I would expect to look for, a just smutty romantic-y whatever, sure, great, it scaled so poorly. It was bad. So not so great. I read the Rhapsodic series. I liked that. I feel like it plays with the more modern Fae situation. Like, she has an apartment, she's like living her best life, kind of, not her best life, she's living kind of terrible life, but like, she has her own world and her own existence, and it's very modern, but you still get that kind of Rhysand kind of dark figure, and I enjoyed it. I read those books all the way through, didn't have a problem with them, loved it. And then I read the These Twisted Bonds series by, I have read the first one. Where's the first one? Why is it hiding? I'm so confused. Oh, These Hollow Vows. There it is. Sorry. I read These Hollow Vows, and then I read a whole bunch of other stuff, and then I came back to the series. So These Hollow Vows, followed by These Twisted Bonds, are a YA fantasy duology, kind of romantic-y duology. They are very low on the spicy rating. And then I read These Cursed Stars, which is like a branch off of that duology. The duology, you kind of have a weird, not quite love triangle situation, but she has to make a choice between two people. It was okay. I don't feel like it was revolutionary. I don't feel like it really got me with any surprises or twists, but it was enjoyable. I think the fact that it is young adult literature, like, they kept it feeling young adult. I like, a high school student could read that. I teach in schools. I would not have a problem seeing a high schooler in my classroom with that in their backpack. Beneath These Cursed Stars, I felt like was just really a letdown. I feel like there was enough potential in These Hollow Vows for me to be like, yes, I want to see where this is going. And then I feel like both These Twisted Bonds, which is the sequel, and then the spin-off, like, they had potential, and they just never got there. They just never lived up to it. Kind of keeping in that same vein, so the other thing that I read a decent amount of this year was young adult books. So in a similar vein, toward the end of the year, when I was kind of in this romantic-y space, but it didn't really need to be spicy, I took a sidestep into the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. So, like, a year or two ago, I had picked up Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I was hopeful that I could, like, jump into that world and not have read Caraval, and it was, I didn't mind it. I wanted to read the sequel, and so that kind of told me that I should go back and read Caraval so that I have more context, because I enjoyed it. So I decided this year to go back and read Caraval. I remember thinking, this book is really good. This is not written for me. Like, I'm enjoying the way that this is written, stylistically, how she put together the language. It feels sparkly. Like, you're looking at a page. You're looking at a black and white page. It's made of paper. But it feels glittery. It feels frothy pink. And she'll be describing this gown, and you're like, the only way I can picture this gown is if in my head I generate the Disney movie, like, Cinderella dress reveal, because that's how all of it is written. So for my, like, true princess ball gown fairy tale people, this is your, like, twist into a romance series, a little bit of fantasy. It feels very sparkly, but, like, the themes are actually quite dark. So I do love a good juxtaposition, so you can get me there. And then, like, your romantic interests, they're not your Prince Charmings, right? They have a different kind of darker feel to them, and so I really like that, but it didn't feel like an immersive world to me, mostly because I'm too much of a fantasy nerd, I think. I'm too much of I want it to be so gritty and grounded in reality that I know exactly how this dirt feels. And I feel like Stephanie Garber's description style leans into the opposite way. That's like, you know, the not quite dark romance for, you know, the girls who grew up wanting to be Disney princesses. Did I ever want to be a Disney princess? That's going to be a no. Let's see, what else did I read? YA, I started, and I'd like to continue at some point, A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Lynn. I read that book. I enjoyed it. I wanted to move to the next one, and then I like checked it out at the library and got distracted. So I didn't finish that sequel, but enjoyed that. I think I gave it about 3.75, 4 stars. Pretty good read. Didn't change my life. I liked the world. And then I have 2 more YA books that I read, and these I actually read because I was trying to familiarize myself with some of the books that were in our book club units for the district that I work in for my job. And so I read 2 books that are YA, and they are both realistic fiction. So I read Patron, Saints of Nothing by Randy Ribay, and then I read We Are Liars by E. Lockhart. Both great for YA, for what I would recommend in a classroom. They are both 5-star reads. They are both 5-star books. Patron, Saints of Nothing, I loved how emotional I felt. I feel like there are a lot of issues that are being grappled with that I feel like hit hard, but in a way that is really appropriate for young adult students, teenagers, right? And like, have I read more viscerally, emotionally wrecking things? Yes. Do I think there are people out there for whom this book is truly deeply emotional? Absolutely. I love the representation of a culture and a community in that book and how those things really shape us. In E. Lockhart's We Were Liars, talk about a book where I struggle to empathize with your main characters, but that is a world that is beyond me. I have never gone to an island to like live in these fancy houses all summer. It's very, very much a situation that I do not like easily generate in my head because it feels so far from me. And so I kind of called the twist, and I don't know, so I had been told, you need to read this book. I knew that this book was in our book clubs, but by the way that I'd been told, you need to read this book, like, call me when you're done reading it, okay? From a person I've never met before in my life, and so, like, did I call them back? No. It signaled something in my brain. I was looking for a twist, right? Like, I knew that I was looking for a twist in the book. I don't really care as much about spoilers, right? Like, I'm fine with the twist, and I'm fine with knowing what the twist is. Like, it'll still get me, usually. I feel like going into that book knowing that there's a twist, it's a really easy twist to guess. Like, if you have been reading books ever, it's an easy twist to get. So, I called it really early. I called it really early on, and I enjoyed the book. It was absolutely a 5-star read. Just kind of knew what was coming. I didn't know the ways in which it happened. All of the revelation of that was great, but I kind of knew the concept early on. Other books I read, I tried reading Will White's Unsold from the Cradle series because that was my husband's recommendation. Sorry, guys. Because that was my husband's recommendation, but I had a really hard time getting into that. I think I owe him that one. I'm going to come back to it at a later time. I started reading some NetGalley books toward the end of the year, so I read Family and Other Calamities by Leslie Gray Streeter. And then the last 2 books of my year actually were in romantasy as well. I needed some escapism in 2024 is what I think all of these books tell anyone. But I went ahead and read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which I do like more than A Court of Thorns and Roses, simply on the writing style and the dialogue. I just feel like the world is a little bit more knit together, and linguistically I don't feel like there are a bunch of tricks that people are trying to convince me of in their writing. I'm like, it just feels like simple, straightforward writing with funny dialogue. Maybe I just really like the dragon banter in their heads. That really is something that I enjoy a lot. I think that kind of quippiness is fun. And so, have I read Onyx Flame as I'm recording this? Yes, I have. Will I possibly be doing a Fourth Wing related video? I don't know, maybe. Tell me in the comments, because I might be willing to do that. It might be fun. I might have an idea. Who knows? She said, while definitely having an idea. Okay, so with that, I think that's all of the books that I read in 2024. Definitely a year of just kind of getting my feet wet. As I go into 2025, I've already started this year. As I start this year, I am hoping to get more into some of the deeper themes, some literary fiction that I have always loved and just need to kind of come back to. I have a couple of other book video ideas in my head, so hopefully those will start coming out with a little bit of regularity as we get started here in 2025. So let me know in the comments below what kind of book content you'd like to see from me, if you'd like any kind of deep dives or vlogs or whatever it is that you think might be fun, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.